we have is our new life in Christ. It's because Christ had defeated death, and he had life, that he defeated death and returned to life. And if we don't teach the resurrection regularly, in fact, I think we might as well be teaching Zeus, or teaching about Baal in our children's Sunday school classes. And I'm not kidding. I think that if we don't teach about the resurrection, our God is no different than the idols. We've taken away the greatest truth about our Savior.
Yeah, I mean you're right on.
Yeah, so so either teach about the resurrection or construct an altar to Baal in your Sunday school room.
Yeah, you might want to have a big. It's going to get messy in there, the sacrifices.
It will get messy. That is true. So, what Easter traditions can we appropriate or utilize in the discipleship of kids? Should we just kind of abandon all of these Eastery stuff to melt all the chocolate and make all the people drink them?
Grind it up and the gold foil and the wrappers.
Put in some milk or something too, so.
I think that we can make use. I haven't done much of it myself. We've done it a little bit at church, but you mentioned the resurrection eggs earlier. Those eggs, now I don't know the history of the eggs. You said you've been learning more about that lately, so you could share that. But bringing those eggs in, Easter eggs are what a lot of people associate with Easter. And so bringing that in as it tells the story of Jesus' cross and his resurrection. And the emphasis on spring and new life, the flowers and stuff like that. I think that you can use that to connect, to talk about God bringing new life and overcoming death. Good. And we're going to get into this in a minute, but the family picnics, that's often a time when families will gather, extended families, and it can be used to illustrate that celebration is a fitting response to what Jesus has done, and including others in that celebration with us, that it's not just this private joy, but we want to spread this to others.
Oh, you Southerners and your picnics. Up north, we don't have the opportunity typically for a picnic.
You still got snow on the ground.
Oh, yeah, we do. Sometimes. So anyway, the Easter egg, yeah, you mentioned that. So I always thought the Easter egg is a pagan tradition, just like, for example, on Christmas, the tree is as a pagan tradition. That's okay, but it's pagan. But the Easter egg is not, actually, nor is even decorating Easter eggs. So the Easter egg actually goes back to the early church. Like the first couple hundred years after Jesus, Christians started celebrating Easter time and the resurrection of Christ. And one of the ways that they would do that would be decorating eggs. And the reason why was because, especially at the time, that the eggs signified new life. And so they thought that using the egg in their worship, signified that the life that they had in Jesus, as well as Jesus returning to life in the resurrection. So, I don't think they did anything like kiss an egg and put it in their pocket while they went down a toboggan, like in Cool Runnings, that movie in the 80s. But they certainly embraced the imagery of the egg, and so I think that's something really beautiful. I think if we teach it and show it, this is a reminder of the life that we have in Jesus and the life that he returned to, and the greater life in that sense. In general, I'm not, in regards to a lot of the other things, I'm not a big fan of cute white lies or misplacing Easter's point. A lot of people do want to do, make it about that the Easter bunny, about that him magically getting you your child a basket. And I'm not big on that kind of misplacement of the focus, but that doesn't mean you can't have fun with it. I think it's okay to do the candy and gifts thing, or even the big Easter ham that in my place and where I'm at, you're going to have indoors because it's going to be bitter cold. As long as we're clear. Yeah, as long as we're clear on the point of why we're doing Easter, that, this isn't about the chocolate, that as much as chocolate is delicious, it's not about the gifts or the little confetti stuff that's going to choke the 2-year-old to death that's in with the baskets.
That stuff is such a pain to clean up. Oh, man.
It is awful. It's from the devil.
Yeah, I think that's certainly been co-opted by the evil one.
Now, can you teach Christ's resurrection to a child without teaching about his death?
I mean, it seems pretty difficult. It's kind of like, well, he was alive and then he was alive again. Wow, kids, hey, okay, let's go make a macaroni cross.
Exactly.
You know?
Macaroni.
So, yeah, I don't think, and we've talked about this before, there was a curriculum publisher that decided to leave out, I don't remember if it was the resurrection I think they did. They left out the cross and the resurrection because they thought it'd be confusing to kids. And I think if it's the same, if it's the publisher, I think it is, they've corrected it to some extent. But yeah, I mean, that's the center of the faith. That's God showed himself most fully in his son Jesus, who came to die and rise again. So there's no way to avoid it. And it's such a beautiful display of God's love. So
yeah. The resurrection is, again, back to what you said. It's narrative nonsense without Christ's death. It just doesn't make any sense at all. That to teach kids that Jesus rose again from what? He has to rise again from something. But even worse, the resurrection is theological nonsense without his death. There's no reason for it. There's no point to it. It takes away the power of it. If he didn't take care of our sins, so what that he rose again? I mean, there's really still no hope apart from Christ's death, and we need to teach our kids the reality of God's punishment of sin. And if we teach God has to punish sin, then we can have new life, but we're going to have new life in hell then, at best case scenario. We're going to live forever in hell would be the closest hope that we could have if Christ hadn't died first, if we didn't first understand his amazing death. So how do we incorporate the whole story of Holy Week into our teaching, especially the message of Good Friday?
Well, I mean, first you need to know it, and then tell what happened and tell why. It's leading to that God is stronger than sin and death. And so, I mean, you open it up and you've got Jesus being recognized as the king, and the king is coming to conquer sin and then ultimately death by the beginning of the new week. And so you just have to weave it all in. I mean, that, again, is the center of the Christian message. It's the center of our hope. And so kids, you don't have to be brutal and show kindergartners the passion, but them knowing the point of why all these events happen, because they are interconnected.
That's good. Yeah, I think one very practical thing is the Good Friday services sometimes are going away, and I think it's a shame. And I think perhaps in celebrating the whole Holy Week and understanding it, consider maybe going to a whole Good Friday service with your family that before Easter, a worship service celebrating that in anticipation of the resurrection. And I think also in talking about the different days leading up to Jesus' death during your family worship time. And I think one way that we do that, as I mentioned a little bit, is those resurrection eggs that I believe that are produced by Family Life, if I remember so. Right today. Right. So, and I think those are a great resource and great help to kind of prepare us and to make the Holy Week something that's significant.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, kids will be engaged by that.
Yes. Now, how can we make our Christian celebration of Easter a spiritual high note for our kids?
I think you let it outshine Christmas, and I think that's just my take on it. Now, I don't know that means you have to give even more presents or do something like that. But Christmas isn't, in the end, as significant as Easter. The point of Christmas was Good Friday and Easter. And so just the anticipation around it, and again, the meaning of it. And I think if your family has experienced sadness in some way, death, to try to weave that in appropriately, depending on the age of your kids, that God is overcoming all of the brokenness that sin brings and the sadness that it brings, and so we can have hope because God Himself has triumphed. So I mean, that's more high level. That's not super practical, but yeah, that's my take on it. What do you think?
That's good. So I think we can build anticipation in the weeks coming up to that Easter. I don't think this means we have to embrace Lent. I know that's a whole a whole thing I don't really want to get into, the theology behind Lent and especially Ash Wednesday. But I think you can still create a season of building up to it, just like we do Christmas time. And I mean, to be singing. There's a lot less things. They don't really make. There's not an Easter tree that you can decorate with your kids, but
right.
I think there's a lot of ways we can sing relevant worship songs and things like that. As a family, make it a time that you're celebrating and anticipating it by and starting to invite people together for the big worship services celebrating Easter. Because I think the reality is, to some degree, far less so than in the past, Easter is one of the days that a non-Christian is most likely to come to a worship service. And so, make it a big deal. Make it that we celebrate Jesus' resurrection by showing the people the hope of new life. One way that we've started to that was introduced to us by actually my wife's aunt, who's a Christian as well, she apparently their family for a long time has done these little resurrection cookies. These little cookies that they're hollow on the inside, and when you open up, there's nothing in there. My wife could probably give a better explanation of them, and you could probably Google them and find out resurrection cookies. But in that they have this message of the tomb was empty. It shows the tomb and how the tomb was empty, and something that my kids are already looking forward to and have asked a little bit about if we're going to do the resurrection cookies again this year, and we sure are.
That's cool.
How can parents guard against the idolatry of family on Easter? I know that I did mention that while it is kind of a big church holiday, a lot of even churchgoers, similar to Christmas time, will skip church so that they can have family time on Easter, to have that family picnic. How do we guard against the kind of idolatry of family and worshiping family first rather than worshiping Jesus first on Easter?
You have to remember what Easter's about. And again, family is a gift from God. But no, in a sense, the New Testament doesn't command us to annually celebrate the day of the resurrection. It's every Sunday is the Lord's Day, and so we're remembering that Jesus rose from the dead. But I think just churches have a role to play in this too, keeping it in front of their people that this is the big deal. And so as you go about that, I think you can invite people to your family gathering, because then it's helping to show that the resurrection created a new community. It created a new people. And so invite neighbors, friends, coworkers, friends from church, people you don't know from church, lost people, but just trying to bring them into the joy and connecting it on those levels. And that's something I've thought about doing in the past and have not, but I would like to incorporate that in our family.
Yeah, that's really good. I think there's a lot of truth in that, and I think a lot of it is just going to be building up and focusing on that worship service. I think of no better day to really build anticipation for a worship service than Easter Sunday. I think it's kind of our capstone Sunday of all of our Sundays. And even to prepare, I think, to fight against that idolatry by preparing your hearts as you come to that important worship service, and for that day to be a day of worship. Maybe even sing some of the great Easter songs that you're going to be singing on Easter worship service the day before or even after the worship service. Now, what can children's ministries do to magnify Christ in Easter celebrations or events?
I think for a small fee, my dad might appear in his bunny costume at your thing. So
sounds good.
I think, making more of Jesus than the eggs, the bunnies, the chocolate, and the candy, and the games, and all that kind of stuff, and just be more excited about him. And I don't think it's wrong that you have some sort of event that could be evangelistic in intent, or just trying to get unbelievers there for your people to be around them. But I'm not like our church typically has, and we've done a podcast episode about this, about some sort of children's worship time while the main worship gathering of the church is happening. We do that, and then